Hello. Today is the 21st day of war in Ukraine, and I'm glad to see John Bolton, United States ex-ambassador to the United Nations and the National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. Hello, Mr. Bolton, and thank you for your time. We don't have much time, so I wouldn't steal it anymore. The first question is Russia's military invasion of Ukraine has been going on exactly 3 weeks today. How can you assess Russia's strategy and Ukraine's resistance?
Well, I think this Russian attack on Ukraine is really an attack on the West as a whole. It's tragic that Ukraine is not already a NATO member, because that might have deterred the attack in the first place, something that was proposed back in 2008, and it was sad then it was rejected, and it's worse now. But I do think that people understand that what the Russians have done constitutes a threat to NATO as well as the obvious threat to Ukraine. The question is whether collectively we can do enough, not simply to defeat the Russian military attack, but to impose high enough cost on the Russian government that they are compelled to give up their demands, to give up the placement of Russian forces on Ukrainian soil, to give up their demands that Ukraine cede sovereignty in whole or in part to anybody other than the Ukrainian people. Now, there are many, many steps that we can discuss that President Zelensky and others have proposed and that we have not yet undertaken, and I think they will get serious consideration in Washington. I think the Russian military has made enormous mistakes. Their failures to make further progress show considerable weakness in their capabilities and in their leadership, all of which I think should give us heart. But I don't think we can be confident that this is going to be resolved without further struggle. I think Putin has put a lot on the line, and I think we have to be very, very clear-eyed and realistic that to succeed here is going to take a lot of hard work remaining. The military and the people of Ukraine have done an outstanding job in these first 3 weeks, but a lot of hard work remains.
Okay, thank you. And how is it possible to end this war?
Well, I think the demands that Russia has made are unacceptable. I think their incursion and purported annexation of the Crimea in 2014 and the creation of these so-called autonomous republics in the eastern part of the country are unacceptable. It may be difficult to find a formula that rolls Russia back to pre-2014 lines, but I think people in Ukraine have to keep their eye on the principle at stake here. If the Russians or anybody else think they can chip away at Ukraine step by step, and if it happens again here, the lesson that they will learn is that they will succeed over time. So I think peace is extraordinarily desirable. There's no doubt about it, but it should not be bought at the price of high principle. The Ukrainian people are fighting for their independence and sovereignty now, and I don't think that is negotiable.
Do you think that Ukraine should make concessions to Russia?
Well, I want to see what concessions the Russians are prepared to make. You know, a negotiated settlement involves both sides coming to an accommodation. But if the Russians come away from unprovoked aggression with any kind of substantial gains, that won't resolve the problem. It may buy a ceasefire now. It may buy a temporary truce, but it will just tell the Russians that if they get their act together next time, they'll get what they want.
Okay. So on the main requirements of Ukraine to the world community is the closure of the sky. How many must more people die for NATO to take such step? And in general, should NATO intervene in the military conflict?
Look, I think that we have to acknowledge that NATO and all of the actions we took failed to deter Vladimir Putin from launching this invasion. But ironically now, Putin is succeeding in deterring NATO. And he makes threats and he makes bluffs and he takes positions that intimidate many people in the West, including people in the United States. Nobody's looking for World War III here, but there are many things that can be done that do not lead inevitably and inexorably to all-out war. And every time Putin backs the West down, it gives him one more advantage in this grinding conflict that's causing so much destruction in Ukraine. I think we should look at a whole range of things that can, for example, get into a no-fly zone step by step. How about, for example, a no-fly zone over the western portion of Ukraine for humanitarian purposes to stop this terrible flow of refugees? I think it can be extended. I think we just need to keep our nerve and not assume that Putin is in complete control here. If he were in such a dominant position, this war would be over, and it's not. So I think we should be very careful, very deliberate. The stakes here are high, but we should not be intimidated by Putin.
Okay, you said that nobody wanting the World War III, but don't you think that it has already started in the territory of Ukraine?
Well, I think what Putin is threatening is a much broader war. And I think many people in Europe are concerned about it. But the people who are most concerned about the effect of Russia's invasion, other than in Ukraine itself, are the Eastern European members of NATO, who very much fear that they will be next if Russia gets away with this unprovoked aggression here. So yes, in that sense, the war has begun. And that's why considerations of additional aid to Ukraine are so important, because if this threat to Ukraine is allowed to prevail, other NATO members are endangered. And that's, I think, part of the failure of the West logic before the invasion, not to understand how important it was. Whether or not Ukraine was a member of NATO, its security was vital to our security.
Okay, thank you. I just saw a video of the Russian parliament discussing the possibility of invasion to the Baltic countries. How do you think? Is it possible, and could Putin make such step?
Well, it's a fact that no military force has ever crossed the border of a NATO country. It's why in 2008, George W. Bush wanted to bring Ukraine and Georgia onto a fast track for NATO membership. And I think if Putin did do that, if he did attack one of the Baltics or Poland, then he would have all-out war in Europe. But I think what his goal here is what we call a salami tactic approach, to take one slice after another and hope that no one slice is so big that it provokes a response. That's why I think it's important for Ukraine in these negotiations with Russia not to give up anything that would lead Putin to conclude that his aggression had succeeded.
Okay, and another threat Putin has is the use of nuclear weapons. Is it possible in 21st century? And how is it possible?
Well, look, with Putin, I think you always have to evaluate what he says. I think his announcement some days ago, he was putting his nuclear forces on higher alert, was a bluff. I think we have testimony in Congress by the heads of the American intelligence agencies that say they saw no operational changes in Russia's nuclear forces. I think Putin tried to intimidate people in the West, and he had some success with some people. But from all the evidence we have, there is no increased risk of his use of nuclear weapons at this point.
But still, they already occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and Chernobyl nuclear plant, and the exposures of these plants will be like a huge danger to Europe. Does Europe ready for that, and why they don't react?
Well, I think the Europeans are still, many Europeans are still hoping that we can bring this to a peaceful conclusion and go back to business as usual. I think that among other things that still need to be done, is a complete closure of Russia's energy sector. I think right now, Europe is still getting oil and gas from Russia and is still paying revenue into the Russian treasury. So Putin is still making a profit off this war. And until we get serious about that, I just don't think Putin will take the position of the West as seriously as it should.
Okay, and what will be the US and the Biden administration's next step in supporting Ukraine?
Well, I think there is obviously division within the United States over exactly what to do, but I can tell you my sense is that in Congress, among Republicans and Democrats on a bipartisan basis, there's very considerable support for significantly increasing support to the people of Ukraine. Sometimes it's the way our system of separation of powers works. One branch has to drag the other branch along. Usually it's the president dragging Congress along. This may be a case where Congress drags the president along. And I think it's very important for people of Ukraine to continue to communicate to their friends and contacts in the United States, stay in touch with people. The willingness of the American people to help out, I think, is considerable, and they're looking for ways. They need ideas. They'd like suggestions. They want to stay in touch.
Okay, thank you. And at the end, what can you say to Ukrainian people and to your readers in Ukraine to support us?
Yeah. Well, this is a very, very trying time in Ukraine. And the burden that the people face because of this unprovoked aggression is indescribable. But I would just remind everybody that that this initial phase of the war is always the worst. When Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, President Roosevelt went to Congress the next day and called December 7th a date that will live in infamy. And that's the same as the date that Russia attacked Ukraine. So as hard as this is, as terrible as the burdens are, and as high as the cost has been so far, to fight for independence and freedom is the highest calling that a people can have. And what the people of Ukraine deserve from the rest of their colleagues in the North Atlantic is all the support that we can give them, because this is the same fight. This is a common struggle against this authoritarian, unprovoked aggression. And the people of Ukraine should know, although they're on the front line, that they have enormous support behind them in the United States and elsewhere.
Thanks a lot for your time. It was Ambassador John Bolton, and I want to remind our listeners that you can download book The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton in website of Vivat Publishing for free in Ukrainian now. Thanks again. Thank you for your support, and Slava Ukraini.
Right. We'll be there. Thank you.